Chapter 6. Out of the Window. At 20 to 5 that morning, Grace felt a hand on her face. It was her mother. Grace was nearly asleep. The wind was screaming and shaking the big windows, and Thomasin Darling had to shout,
"Go to bed, Grace. It's nearly morning. I'll look after the lantern now."
"All right, Mother." Grace got up slowly and went downstairs to her bedroom. It was much quieter in her room because of the strong stone walls. She looked at the birds' eggs on her table, the books on the desk near the bed. The bed looked warm and comfortable. She smiled and began to get undressed. A little grey light was coming in through the window. "It's nearly morning," she thought. "I'll look at the sea before I go to sleep." She walked to the window and looked out. But she could see nothing because of the salt and rain on the glass. "It doesn't matter," she thought. "I'm too tired. I'll go to bed." But before she went to bed, she prayed. And when she prayed, she heard a voice in her head. "Go to the window, Grace," it said. "Go and look out." So she got up, went to the window and opened it. The wind blew strongly into the room. It blew her hair across her face, and some books fell on the floor. In the grey morning light, Grace looked out across the sea. Most of the rocks and small islands were under water. Big, white waves were breaking over them. The sea was wild, frightening, terrible. Grace looked and felt cold. She could not remember a storm as bad as this. She thought of her warm bed and began to close the window. Then she saw the ship. It was a big ship on Harker's Rock, about 300 meters away to the southwest. A very big ship, but it was broken in two, with white water breaking all over it. Grace could not see it very well because of the rain and the sea. "Father! Father! Come quick!" She ran out of the room, down the stairs to her parents' bedroom. "Come quick! There's a ship on Harker's Rock! A big one! A passenger ship! It's broken in two!" William Darling was out of bed in a second. He put on his boots and coat and followed Grace up the stairs. "Did you see any people?" "No, Father, but it's difficult to see anything in this wild sea." Her father took a telescope from his pocket and stared out of Grace's window at the wreck of the Forfarshire. He looked for a long time, then said, "I can see no one, but my eyes are old. You look, lass." Grace stared carefully through the telescope. White water crashed over the wreck. Sometimes the ship moved on the rock, and sometimes pieces of wood fell off into the sea. But she saw no people. "No, Father, I think they have all drowned." "Poor, poor people." "Yes, but it's a good thing too, William." Grace's mother was in the room now, and she was looking out of the window with her husband and daughter. "Why is that, Thomasin?" William asked her.
"Why, because the boys aren't here, William. You couldn't take a boat out in that wild sea alone. No one could. If there are people alive on that ship now, you cannot save them, William." "I could go with him, Mother," said Grace quietly. "Not in a sea like that, Grace," her mother said. Her father said nothing. "We mustn't stop looking," said Grace. "If there is someone alive, we can't just leave them to die." And so, for the next 2 hours, Grace and her parents watched the wreck of the Forfarshire through the telescope. Slowly, daylight came, but they saw no people, only rain and waves and a broken ship in the wild, angry sea. Chapter 7. On Harker's Rock. There were 12 people on Harker's Rock. Daniel Donovan was with Mrs. Dawson and her children, and there were 8 other people near them. The wreck of the Forfarshire was behind them, between them and the lighthouse. They were nearly dead with wet and cold. Every 2 minutes, white water fell on them. Daniel had lost his coat, and the wind cut through his thin shirt like a knife. His hands and legs were red with blood. Mrs. Dawson was crying, and sat with her arms around her 2 small children. Mr. Robb prayed in a loud voice without stopping. Thomas Buchanan and the other men sat together, too cold to move. One man had a broken leg. The waves got bigger, and the people on the rock moved closer together. After half an hour, Mr. Robb, the churchman, stopped praying. Daniel looked at him. He was lying on the rock, his face white and cold. His eyes were open, but he did not see Daniel's hand in front of his face. He was dead. "We'll all be dead soon," shouted Thomas Buchanan angrily. "No man can live long here in this wind." "Why don't they come from the lighthouse to save us?" shouted James Kelly. The lighthouse! Daniel remembered it suddenly. "We must wave to it," he shouted. "They can't see us here. Come up onto the top of the rock. Wave to them." Daniel and James Kelly climbed to the top of the rock. But at first, the others did not move. They were too cold, too tired, too frightened. Thomas Buchanan had to hit them and push them to the top of the rock. The wind was very strong there, so it was difficult to stand. They held onto the rock and shouted and waved at the lighthouse as hard as they could. No one answered. Behind the wild sea and the rain, the lighthouse stood, still and quiet. A few minutes later, the light stopped flashing. But they saw nobody. One by one, the men came down from the top of the rock and sat with their arms around each other out of the wind. Only Daniel and Thomas Buchanan stayed on top of the rock. They waved and shouted and cried, but they saw no one. Their faces were as cold as death, and salty and wet from the sea. Chapter 8. The Worst Sea This Year. Grace saw them first. Her mother was cooking breakfast in the kitchen, and her father was turning off the lantern. Grace was still looking out of her window through the telescope. For a second, she saw a man on top of the rock. Then she could not see him behind the waves. But a minute later, she saw him again, and there were two men this time. They stood together and waved wildly. Then the rain came, and she could see nothing. But perhaps there were 4 or 5. She put down the telescope and called her father. "Father, come quick! There are men on the rock. They are still alive." William Darling ran into the room. He saw them. He put down the telescope and looked at his daughter. "We must go, lass," he said quietly. "You and I. We must take the boat and save them. Will you come?" "Of course, father," she said. "If we don't save them, who will?" "That's right, lass." William Darling looked out of the window unhappily. "I've not seen a worse sea this year. No boat could come from the mainland in this wind." Grace's mother came into the room and heard him. "You can't go, William," she said. "Grace is only a girl. Look at that sea. You'll both drown." "We have to try, Mother," said Grace angrily. "Think of those poor people alone on that rock. We live on a lighthouse. It's our job." "It's a job for your father and brothers, Grace, not you. You'll drown. How will that help those men?" "How will it help them if we do nothing?" Thomasin Darling looked out of the window again at the wild, angry sea. She shook her head. "Perhaps you'll get to the rock, Grace," she said, "with God's help and the wind behind you. But you'll never get back against the wind. Not one man and a girl in a storm like this. Never." William Darling took his wife's hands in his. "Listen to me, Thomasin," he said. "There are 3 or 4 seamen on that rock. Strong men. They'll help row us back if we save them." "If you save them," said Thomasin. "And if you don't?" At first, William Darling did not answer. He looked into his wife's eyes. "We're going, Thomasin," he said quietly. "We'll have to go. Come down now and help us with the boat." Outside, in the terrible wind and the rain, it took them 15 minutes to get the boat ready. 3 times the waves nearly broke the boat on the rock. William got in first and sat at the front. Grace and her mother held the boat away from the rocks. William got 2 oars ready and waited for the next wave. "All right, Grace, get in now!" he shouted. Grace jumped into the boat, and William pulled hard with the oars. 1, 2, 3 pulls, and then a wave lifted the boat, and the oars were pulling at air. But they were away from the rocks. The boat came down between 2 waves, and Grace quickly got her oars out. They both pulled hard together, but carefully too. They did not want to lose an oar in the wild water. Grace was cold, and her dress and hat were wet. She was afraid, but happy and excited too. "This is what God wants me to do," she thought. At the top of a wave, she could easily see across the long stone rock to the other side. Then the boat went down between the waves, and she could see only mountains of wild water everywhere. "Pull left! Left!" William shouted. "We must keep the rocks between us and the worst waves." Grace pulled hard at her oars and watched the waves. "God will help us save them," she thought happily. "I know he will." Outside the lighthouse, Thomasin Darling watched the little boat. She saw it for a second, then it went behind a wave and came up again. "It's not possible," she thought. "No boat can live in a sea like that. Oh, God, please save my husband and daughter." She watched and prayed, and the little boat got smaller and smaller on the wild, grey sea.